Hello everyone, my name is Lily and welcome to my second ever SpeedPaint! I decided to go with Raven and Starfire from Teen Titans. I did a fan art poll and they won, so it's been a long time since I've done fan art of Western characters, and this was a lot of fun to do because I have more of a anime influenced style, so it was neat to see how they looked in it. I didn't get the process of me sketching last time, so I'm really excited that it actually worked this time. However, I did lose some of the line art, so you'll see me go in and I'll show you a little bit of it, but most of it got lost, so I'm sorry about that. I'm sure eventually, one of these days, I'll get the whole process on camera and you guys can see it, but I really wanted to show the sketching process because a lot of people have requested it, and I think it's fun to see other people's inspiration and kind of like how they do things and see their processes, so that's what I wanted to do here. For my sketching process, I do a couple of things. I normally work on 3 layers, and the first one's a thumbnail. And I didn't show this, but I did sketch out a couple of different poses in thumbnail form that I wanted to include, well, not include rather, but that I wanted to play with. I decided on this one. I thought the poses looked the most interesting and the most dynamic. Not that they're necessarily really dynamic, but they are more dynamic than I normally do. So that's why I wanted to do this one. I really like the stark contrast between the poses of Raven and Starfire, but anyway, so I do the thumbnail, and then on top of that I do a anatomy sketch where I really flesh out the figures and I really try to make the figures look proper and how I think they should look, and make sure the anatomy is how I want it to be and the poses are how I want them to be. Then the last layer, or last 2 layers, depending on the character or characters that I'm drawing, is making them the character. Before this I just have a base figure, and you'll see me actually pull up the references quite a lot during this process so I can make sure I get all the details right. But this stage is what really makes the character, I think. And it's the most fun. The best part is actually drawing the character, so yeah. This process is pretty simple. There's not a lot to explain. It's just going through and making sure that everything looks the way it should before I lay down the line work. Making sure the characters look like the characters, feel like the characters, you know. After this stage, like, my process for everything is pretty much the same. I do my sketches, and then I'll do my line art, then I'll clean the line art if I feel it's necessary, and then I'll do the flat colors and then the shading, and I do the same thing pretty much every time, so I'm not gonna really go into it and explain it all, because there's really not a lot to explain. If I could go back and do this piece again, I think I would make Starfire's anatomy a little bit better. I would make her skirt less flowy and more tight like it's supposed to be, and I'd make her legs a little longer. I think Raven looks well enough, but I feel like I could have done a little bit more work on Starfire. Okay, so here's where, yeah, I've lost most of the line art, so I'm just quickly going through and showing you like some of it. But yeah. I would also maybe work a little bit more with the composition in terms of a background, because I didn't really do much of one. I just did what I normally do, which is a gradient and some effect in the background to make it a little more interesting. I want to incorporate more objects, and I want to incorporate more like interactions. So I definitely, if I could do this again, I'd go back and redo it with that in mind. Really quick, also, you'll see here, what I did was I made the skin a really bright colored pink, and I do that whenever I have to put in light colors, especially on a light background. I'll go through with a dark color or a really vibrant color, one that you can really see all the leftover white spaces, so I can make sure that I have every piece, every part filled up. I know it looks weird at first, but I promise there's a reason. I don't do it for like no reason. And if you're just starting with digital art, there's a pro tip for you. If you're going to have to do a light color, like light skin or white hair or, you know, button down white shirt, go through, and figure out where everything, all the white spots are with a really dark color or a really light, like really saturated color. That's the word I'm looking for. So that way you can really see where you miss in the initial filling. And it really helps me a lot to do that. And I know I'm not the only one who does that. I actually learned it from a friend of mine, so a long time ago I learned it from a friend of mine. Drawing these two characters, it was really interesting to see how similar their color palettes are and how simple their color palettes are. I kind of expected them to be more complicated, but I guess with animation, you have to make them simpler so that way, you know, they animate easier, they animate well. So, another thing I did do with the color palettes was I did alter them very, very slightly, because the way I do shadows is they're very dark and they're very deep, at least to me they are, initially at least. So I generally block color with a lighter shade than is actually necessary. Like in the color swatches, Starfire had really dark hair and Raven had really, well, not really dark skin, but darker skin, and I knew that I was going to add a lot of shadows to it, so I ended up making them both lighter just to make the contrast a little bit better. And I don't normally go through and add highlights, especially on things that aren't hair or metallic or shiny. So going through and making the skin lighter than normal, or the hair lighter than normal, and then doing darker shadows kind of makes up for that. Now we're getting onto the shading part, and I was initially just going to do soft shading like normal, but I'm really trying to stay away from that lately. I feel like it looks too soft, I overblend it, I'm not really sure where I want to go with it. So I end up going back and I did a soft shade on the first layer to give it kind of a gradient, and then on the second layer I did a darker cell shade, and I think I like the effect of that pretty okay. I'm not really sure if I want to keep doing that, but for this piece I think it works pretty well. I definitely want to play with that concept a little bit more, combining the two shading styles. So I guess we'll see where it goes in the future. As far as my shading technique, it's not really complicated. Just whenever I do cell shading, I make sure that my stability on my brush is pretty high. I'm not very good and not very stable when it comes to line work, and with cell shading, you know, it's really crisp and clean. So having good shading, having good, you know, clean lines is pretty important, so I always make sure the stability is up. And if you're curious, I use Clip Studio Paint for my program to draw on. It's relatively inexpensive and it's a little bit more complicated, and you have a few more options than, say, Paint Tool Sci, which I used for a long time and I know is very popular. So yeah, here you can just see me going back with the cell shade layer. I wasn't initially going to give her purple lips, I was going to give her like skin flesh tone lips. Well, I mean her skin's orange, but you know. I decided to give her purple. I felt like it matched the outfit more, made it a little more cohesive. I just liked it better. I tend to stray towards dark lips because it really accentuates the lips more, and I like the way they look and I like to draw them, so. I also very much like how expressive Starfire is in this. I don't generally draw such active expressions, which is something I'm trying to get better at. So it was really fun to not only draw it, but to kind of see that it looks nice and I can do it. It's definitely increased my confidence in doing so. While I finish this up, I did want to come to you guys and ask what sort of discussion topics you'd like me to do in my videos. I don't want to go through my process every single time. It gets kind of boring and redundant. I do the same thing pretty much every time, so once you've heard it once, you've heard it a million times. I was kind of wondering, you know, like maybe leave me a comment and tell me what you'd like to hear, what things you'd like me to discuss or talk about. I can do tutorials, I can do pretty much anything. It doesn't bother me. There's really no topic that's off limits, just topics that maybe are above my skill level, so drop me a comment below and tell me what you'd like to hear, what things you'd like to talk about. I do have a couple of videos that I want to do. I want to do a video on creating characters, I want to do a video on finding your style, maybe some tutorials, ways to stay motivated, you know, things like that. I think doing those types of videos are fun, and I like to watch them myself, so I hope you can look forward to those types of things in the future. But for speed paints like this, I generally find myself not knowing what to talk about, so like I said, if you wanted to leave me a comment, tell me what you think you want me to talk about, what you'd like to hear, that would actually help me out a lot, so I appreciate that in advance. There's not really much more to say at this point. It's just, like I said, doing the same thing over and over, doing the gradient shade and then the cell shade, and then if it's hair or metallic, then I'll do a highlight. But that's pretty much my process. It's not very complicated. As we wrap this up, I do want to kind of give myself a self-promo. I do have a Patreon, and if I have 2 tiers, $1 and $5 a month, and so that's not a lot. But if you want to see things before anyone else, if you just want to support me as a creator, occasionally I'll post discounts on commissions and stuff and designs for everybody. So if you want to support me on there, just at least give it a look maybe, I'd really appreciate that. I'll link it in the description box below. Of course you don't have to, but you know, every little bit helps, and it would really help me as a creator. And also you can follow me on Twitter. I'm most active on Twitter. I'll link it in the description box below as well. I post there quite a lot, at least once a day. I don't necessarily post art all the time, but I do talk about games and characters, and that is where I post my art most frequently. So if you wanted to follow me on Twitter, that would be pretty awesome. At least to stay updated. I really had a lot of fun drawing the folds, or shading the folds in her cape. That's something I'm trying to get better at too, is making clothing look more realistic and have more realistic folds and stuff, so I think I did pretty good on the hood there. Also, I did want to mention, I'm going to try to upload at least once a week. We'll see how it goes, but for now that's going to be the schedule I'm going to try to stick to. But yeah, that about wraps this up. I mean, just putting the finishing touches, and I do change the background and add a little bit of interest to it. So, if you haven't already, if you subscribe, that would really help me a lot. It would let me would show me that you guys want to see what I'm making. And, you know, thumbs up this video if you want to see more. Leave me a comment if you have anything you want me to talk about. And follow me on social media. Check out my Patreon if you want to support me. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next one.